Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Love Well podcast. My name is Anna.
And my name is Marlene.
And if you guys are joining in, we have been continuing with our immigration series and just been really blessed and honored to be able to share all of the stories that we have in the past and continue to be able to share all of our guests that have been able to be on here and willing and vulnerable to share their story. So we are continuing that today. Marlene, would you like to tell more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So today is a special treat for us. I have two very special people in my life, Melvin and Mariela. Welcome to the Love Well podcast. Melvin and I actually grew up together in Honduras. And so we've known each other, our families know each other. Our moms have been friends for a long time. So we go way, way back. And then Mariela came into his life and they got married, and it's been just a treat to get to know them. And as we have been telling stories about immigration, and we have been seeing all the different layers, all the different ways to immigrate. Today, we're going to get to hear a different side of immigration. And for the first time, our first couple as well.
Yes.
Who also they will share how their stories of immigration have been different and what ways it's been similar. So anyway, Melvin, Mariela, so excited to have you guys here. As we start this conversation, could you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves?
So thank you for having us. My name is Melvin. I am lucky to be here with Mariela tonight. This podcast as well. I did listen a couple of the other podcasts that you guys did as well, and I'm really excited on the stories that you're sharing and the different perspectives that I think we all live through
Yeah.
the immigration process. I was born in San Pedro Sula, Honduras, but raised all my life in Ceiba. Um, as you were saying, Madeline, alongside with you, pretty much grew up in a Christian household
Mhm.
and have been pursuing exciting paths since I was a kid, specifically on technology, with always a focus on helping people. So that's been my journey so far, trying to connect different passions that I got around technology, around innovation, with the main focus of helping people throughout it. So that has taken me through different roads in life. The one that I got, the one that I'm more proud of to say it's the one that led me to Mariela. Uh, so yeah, that's a bit about me.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Let me just brag a little bit. He's being super humble, and I love that about you. But when he said like technology, so let me tell you, he was a pioneer in Honduras when it comes to technology. He even received an award from the president of Honduras. Could you tell us just a little bit about Guala, right? And just a short synopsis, just because it's a big deal. Like it's a pretty big deal what you were able to do in our country.
So yeah, and one of those roads and nights of finding what I'm gonna do with all these passions that I have in myself, I decided to dive into a project that involved 3D printing or additive manufacturing technologies, directly focused towards helping people with physical disabilities, specifically with people with upper limb disabilities, which means that people, for example, that are born with a congenital condition like no hands or no forearms or had an accident. So together with some friends, we developed a project, started being a project that developed open source 3D printed prosthetics for them that were functional, that were aesthetically pleasing as well, and that were pretty innovative at that time in Honduras, since the technology was being barely used or was pretty constrained to just people that had the money or university. So it was a pretty big breakthrough in Honduras. We had a lot of media
You were a
attention.
pioneer
That's
for
Yeah,
amazing.
sure. A
yeah.
Yeah.
pioneer.
So yeah, it was a really exciting project to get started with. I was back in 2017, and it has escalated pretty well. I am mostly nowadays just a consulting member for the now NGO, that it's also part of a bigger technology innovation center in Honduras as well. So the what used to be a little baby back then, now it's a full grown up project that has been involved to
Wow.
keep people. So
Well,
that's
I
a,
didn't even know that. So thank you for sharing. That's amazing. That's amazing. But anyway, I just wanted to, you know,
thank you.
make sure that I just mentioned that because I just think it's super cool. You inspired, I know, not only me, but I know a lot of people in our country where those opportunities and even going for it and doing those things is not common, So you've been a trailblazer in many, many different ways. Mariela, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that's a perfect point for me to jump in because that's where we met in that phase of him, like before the breakout of these becoming an NGO and being known throughout every media in Honduras. Um, well, I'm from the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. It's called Limón. So I think we had a similar upbringing. Um, I was finishing my degree in physical therapy when I met Melvin. And this was just an idea, what he just shared. It was just like an intention. I want to help a friend who has an amputation. I want to get him a prosthetic device and I want to build up this. And I was, during that time, that exact time, I was in my semester where we get that prosthetic and prosthetic course in physical therapy. So I said, "Oh my God, I'm just learning about all of these. Can I help you?" And that's how we joke about it. It all started being like work related and related to the project. But then we, of course, got connected deeper and deeper. And I finally met him in person in Honduras after, I think, 6-7 months. Eventually, of course, I finished my physical therapy degree and trying to meet each other's path. He was trying to get an internship in Costa Rica so that we could be together. He found out another internship opportunity in the US. Maybe here I'm jumping into how we got to the US.
But that's great.
It's part of the process. So Melvin got an internship in the US. It was supposed to be 3 months. Eventually, he got another opportunity, a scholarship, to finish up his degree, his undergrad there in the US. So I had already finished my undergrad and I said, I definitely want to do grad school. So now that you're there and we can search for opportunities, I started looking for programs that were at the exact location that he was at. And that's how I got to social work, focused more in the health lens, so more in the public health lens of social work. But that's how I did my grad school and how I also immigrated to the US.
That's
That's
awesome.
so cool. I think we should also mention you guys are currently in Honduras, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Well, I think that's so cool that we can still use technology in this way to be able to, leverage your story and everyone can hear it, and connect with you guys on it too. Okay, so you kind of mentioned this, Mariela, but when exactly did you immigrate to like how old were you when you said you immigrated to the US? And can you share like a little bit of how it was like coming here?
I was 22.
22, yeah.
22, yeah.
Okay.
I was 22 years old. But well, I think our first experience for the both of us was when we actually got to know about the existence of each other, which was through a U.S. Embassy scholarship program. Back then, I was 19 and Melvin was 18. Were you 18? Yeah. And it was an exchange program. You will have the opportunity to go for 6 months to any state And they will match your profile, like that career that you were doing, the undergrad career that you were doing, your personal interests, like if you were sporty or if you were religious or if you were, like your inclination was matched to the profile of the university, regardless of which state. So they'll place you to whichever university your profile matched, and you'll be there throughout 6 months. That was our first, both of us, for the both of us, our first immigration experience. But the longer one, or maybe the one where we actually lived in the U.S. Was or came until 2020 for me, 2021. For Melvin, it came earlier. And to your question of how was the experience, I think we all come, or we all get to the U.S. at the very beginning very, very excited, like with a bag full of dreams that you have always had, but at the same time with the feeling that I'm finally getting all of the dreams outside of this bag and meeting them and seeing them, and kind of unfolding all of what I had in my head. Of course, eventually you find out it's not like that. It doesn't work like that. It's a whole process for each of the little dreams or big dreams that you have. But I think the most beautiful part that you don't get to dream before going to the US is the many cultures that you interact with when going there and living there. Of course, it depends on the location, but if you are open to get to know far beyond the US culture, the cultures that encompass the US culture itself, it's pretty cool. Yeah. How was it for you?
Yeah. Melvin, tell us from your point of view.
So immigrating for me was about opportunity. It was regardless of the country. It was more about where my chances were better to being able to develop the ideas that I had back then. So it was very circumstantial as well. At that point, I had very clear that I was transitioning from an education that perhaps wasn't at that point giving me all the opportunities that I needed to develop the ideas that I had. So I had to find different sources from where I could get them. So I started looking into different opportunities to do so. And I did. In that sense, I think I've had a really good both inspiration, but also support from my parents since I was a kid. So I knew that I was pretty independent as far as looking for opportunities outside, right? Without having that fear of, I gotta get the approval from this and that to do so. And without really thinking about the whole scope of what it really meant going to another country, right? So this scholarship that Mariela was mentioning about, really, I saw it one day when I was scrolling through Facebook, and I said, it sounds like the right thing. I've been looking for a new venture for a while and had this idea that we were mentioning about Guala before. So I knew that this was going to be the perfect challenge of saying, okay, I'm going to be given, or I'm rooting to get this opportunity. I need to have a solid idea to develop when I get it. So both things happen and we're matched. So that's where I got the first scholarship, which is called UGRAD. And it's like the equivalent of a smaller version of the Fulbright scholarship, right? So I got it. I really did almost 75% of the process without even my parents knowing. I pretty much notified them like 2-3 months before I was going to leave the country.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
How
So
did you take it?
they knew me at that point, right? I've been out of my house for almost 2-3 years at that point, and they know my ambitions, right? So they were pretty supportive. from that point on, they knew that I was not going to last that long in the country anyhow, right? So for me, that opportunity was the first door as far as knowing that there was a whole sort of opportunities out there that were ready to be taken. And sometimes the only thing, the only gap for people not going to them is because people stand on they stand, or they're being stopped by this wall of maybe I'm not going to get it, or maybe it's not for me, so on and so forth, right? And I've been living with that motto since then, right? I've experienced and I've lived through a whole different bunch of exciting opportunities, being to places that I've never thought myself that I was going to be. Met this wonderful wife that I have. Many different blessings that really took based on the approach of, what's going to be the worst thing that happens if I give it a shot, right? So that's been, that immigration, that first immigration for me was key, and everything to come after that.
I'm curious because you talked about like mainly coming to the States for opportunity, right? And like we just had a guest last episode actually, and it was interesting to hear her point of view, because she said when she came here, and I can imagine with your background of, being ambitious, innovative, having those ideas that you talked about earlier, like what was the feeling when you got here? Was it, oh, I'm accepted as I am? Or was it, she mentioned it's like a crash course of humility, right? Because she had all these like higher education, I guess like she had been through the education system back home where she was from, and she was like top of her class. And, I mean, she was very smart. Everyone was like, you're pretty smart. You're a genius, really. And she came here and she said it was honestly like, it didn't matter what I knew. It was who I knew. And that's how that's how she came up, as like, she was treated in that way. I'm just curious if you can relate to that, or if that's like a different experience
Or
that you
maybe
came.
your experience was different. Yeah. Because where did you guys move to also? So it's just for everyone to
Well,
know.
yeah,
That's
and Mariela, you mentioned, you come with a bag of dreams, and like your like
and
expectations are like up here, and then not to say that like everyone's experience is the same, because it's
for
not,
sure.
but like we have heard more people on this podcast saying like, yeah, it wasn't all that I thought it was going to be, or there's a learning curve for sure.
Mhm.
So just curious, like as far as education and like your background, did you feel like that was accepted? Did you feel like people looked at you with like, dignity in that sense? Or was it more like, oh, you're not from here?
Yeah.
kind of thing?
I think for me, a key part of the development that I had on those early years in the States was exactly looking for the opposite. I was not looking for acceptance at all, but rather embracing the differences that I was taking with me to the country. For me, that played a key role in all the opportunities that open up. So in that first 6 months that I was in that experience of the
You're
of the UGRA, of the university exchange, that's really much all that I exploited back then. It was not the grades that I had in Honduras, or how smart I was, or whatever, was really what I lived back there in Honduras, and people loved it. Right? So I remember those 6 months. Most of them I spent it talking with people about my experience and my degree in the country, about how similar we are in some stuff, or how different we are in others, right?
Yeah.
I remember always one experience that really marked me was in some engineering courses that I was taking back in the university. The main interest of the professor was how we were able to achieve things in Honduras with so low budgets on stuff, that they had all the unlimited budget to do so in the States, right? So for me, I think from that point on, I understand it, how what perhaps I've been complaining all my life about not having in my own country was going to be the biggest thing to share when I was in other. Because for me personally, it was gonna be giving me an opportunity to always have a point of perspective on everything I did. So even with me being in another country, I knew what that same perspective or that same setup meant in a whole different other, right? In a whole other country. So that gave me fresh ideas. That gave me different perspective that people might have not seen before. So for me, it was all about embracing everything that my country had given me at that point, and from that point on as well, this is the concept that I like to share the most, is that I understand it that at that very point I became a bridge between two countries. So a bridge of knowledge, a bridge of wealth, a bridge of contacts, a bridge of information between the USA and between my home country. So any point when I was speaking with somebody, at any point that I was in a course, at any point that I was having an experience, I knew, or I directly connected with how was I gonna bridge this X knowledge, experience, whatever, to something in my home country. And yeah, that started being a game changer.
That's
Awesome.
cool.
Yeah. So do you feel you guys moved to, did you say where did you guys move to?
So we were in different countries when we initially moved to
States.
the States. I think we like to say to talk about it like on two different phases. That initial one was just a setup for both, which was in 2016. It was just a 6-month exchange program, and then the second phase was when we moved like semi-permanently there, which was for me back in 2017 and for Mariela in 2020.
Where in the States did you guys move to the second phase?
So in the second phase, we moved to Rochester, New York.
Okay. See, that's also interesting too, because we've had guests that have kind of been California, wasn't it like Arkansas?
Arkansas, I
They've
think.
been, all over.
Literally all over.
And it's as random as it sounds for us as well to have moved to Rochester, New York. It was a circumstantial opportunity that I was given to move there based on this exchange, a second exchange program that Mariela was mentioning, and it happens to be there in Rochester. So that's where I move, and I think it was a matter of choice for Mariela as well to be there so that we could both, first of all, so she could study and continue her studies, but also so that we could be together and start solidifying our relationship.
Yeah. And what about you, Mariela? How was your experience with, as Anna alluded to, like, okay, you come in with a bag full of dreams, and how did that meet your expectations? How did you experience that?
Yeah, I'm reflecting on what Melvin just shared. It makes me think how it was very different for the both of us. And I think, of course, we have very different personalities and thought processing and all of that. But I think not only the approach to like from each other to get to the US was different, but also I think that the interactions that we had in the US, right? So Melvin, when he moved, he immediately had kind of 3 different settings. He had his work setting, he had his university setting, like educational setting, and he had his social setting.
Yeah.
I basically got into the US and jumped immediately to the educational setting. And the university that I was at was what is called a white majority university.
Yeah.
So for me, I have to say it was a little bit harsh at the beginning.
Yeah.
Especially because, as you may have noticed already, my accent is stronger than Melvin's. So I struggled a lot at the beginning. And I have to say that my accent has gotten quote unquote better quote unquote I say, because accents are, I think accents are beautiful. Like accents for me
We
are,
think so too.
they, they they represent where the person is coming from. So it's so beautiful for me to hear like an European accent and Latino accent, and even Latinos accent in English are so different from one another, because you can hear the singing in Spanish, like the Colombian singing in English.
Oh yes, our accents are very different.
Yeah, so for me it was much more marked than Melvin, because Melvin had much more interactions with Americans than what I have had back in Limón. And maybe that's something as well, like in Limón, there's not a second language, but maybe a dialect. I don't know if it's recognized already as a language, but they speak Mecatelio, which is also like a Jamaican-based language, because we have a big population. Maybe our biggest representation, cultural representation, is a mixture of Chinese immigrants and Jamaican, African immigrants that have grown up there. So it's a mixture in Limón. So English that it's also spoken in the community, it's very different from the American one, right?
For sure.
And Melvin had a different, maybe Marlon has the same background of receiving a lot of Americans who were volunteering at their church. So you were very familiar with all of the American singing in English. So so for me, that was what that played a big difference, like trying to be set up in a educational dynamic right when I got into the US, having to be, already so professional, because I was doing a grad school program. I come in with my accent, and I'm speaking out, because I have always been like this. Like I have always expressed myself or tried to express myself. It was hard at the beginning, because I do something even in Spanish, and Melvin at the beginning got frustrated with this. Now he's familiar with it. That I speak a lot. I think a lot about my words. Like while I'm speaking, I pause and I think of my words, but it's not because I'm translated. Sometimes it's because I'm thinking of my words. Even in Spanish, I'm thinking of my words. So when I was starting, the relationships in the US, it would be hard, because like people will think or will assume like I'm thinking or trying to get my word in Spanish, so they will finish up my sentence, for example. I hated that, because it was like, no, I'm trying to say that, like, just it's sorry. And that, and maybe even, I have to say, maybe even being a woman, like being a woman versus being a man who has migrated, and there's a whole different the experience of getting independent outside of your country is different for men than for women, I think.
Yes.
I'm also the youngest of my 4 siblings. Melvin is the oldest of his siblings, so that also played a big role. Like I was leaving my mom's nest empty, while Melvin was just like the first one to leave,
Yeah.
So there was a lot of little key differences that played a role in our perception of how the immigration process was. And I have to say, the first phase for me was very hard. If it wouldn't have been for Melvin, I would have run away back to my home country, because for me, it was so cold. Like I just wanted to run and hug every Latino and Black person that I found in the street. That's honest, because like most of the time, Melvin will pick me up from school or from wherever, and I would just be crying. Like I would just say, Melvin, how is it possible that I enter a room and I say buenos dias, good morning, whatever language you speak, and people don't read back at you? Like when I was in my home country, my mom will pinch me or hit me on the head, like good morning. You don't see those people. So of course, I come to the US. That's the first thing I do to every space that I enter. Good morning, how are you? And people be like, back to their business, because who the heck are you? Why are you talking to me? So that was like, there was maybe a lot of cultural maybe shocks for me that I have had already in the exchange program, but like living there, after a while, it takes a toll on your heart, at least on mine. So
For sure, no. And I can imagine also there's a difference when you visit somewhere and you know that there's a limited amount of time, then there's a permanency that comes when you immigrate. It's like, oh, this is my new home. So
yeah,
these are the new layers and cultural things that I have to get used to. And my experience was similar in some those ways too, where I felt like the coldness of, or I was like, oh, it's gonna be an adjustment, not having to kiss on the cheek and say hi, you know. But I love that you guys also shared that your experiences are different, because that's one of our hopes here too. And you guys are married and you see that both of your experiences are completely different. I can also share my sister and I's experience have been completely different as well. So it's just it's such a good reminder that because we find a lot in the conversations around immigration, it's easy to assume that every story is the same. But here we have proven yet again and again that every single story and experience is different. And it's interesting that you brought the whole accent thing, because we've actually talked about it. Multiple of our guests have said how having an accent has really affected them. And not only like we have had some of them like share that people question their intelligence, you know, or
absolutely, yes.
of their accent. And even in the last couple episodes ago, Angelica was sharing she did not know English when she moved to the US, then learned English but had an accent, and she said that became a crutch as well. So thank you for sharing, because I know that that's also not, you know, an easy thing, but immigrating comes with both the beautiful and the hardships, and that is just a reality, you know, and things that we really don't hold back on here, believe me. Just sharing the truth of what it is, you know, because every experience is different, you know, so we have to make space for that. So I'm curious, what were some other hardships? So because you definitely also had two different experiences, so I'm curious, what were some other hardships, if you are willing to share with us, that you guys experience when it comes to like, okay, this is my new home, these are the cultural differences, how do we, you know, move forward when we experience hardships?
So hardships, I think, have just been part of our relationship and are still in part as far as immigration go. Not in Honduras by choice to start. We're here because we are still settling our immigration process in the U.S. So that's that. That's a big hardship that has been happening since we started. We immigrated to the U.S. on a temporary visa, which is the status that you gain when you're a student. So that means that you're there from point A to point B. It's a project, right? So you're meant to go back. Specifically on the scholarship that we got in 2016, the first one, that it's a visa that, since it's U.S. sponsored, it requires you to go back to your country for 2 years. So for Mariela, that did happen. She finished the program on May 2016, went back to Costa Rica for 2+ years, right? For me, I was just in Honduras for a year after the program. So that meant that by the time that I went back to the US in 2017, I had still 1 year left out of those two. It's called 212 J1 requirement, right? So that's basically every J1 student, or every student that gets that type of work study visa needs to complete that requirement, right? If you look online, that's a pretty recurrent issue that students find themselves having, right? So what it means basically is that after your program ends, regardless if you keep studying for the next 10 years in the US, at some point you got to complete that requirement of 2 years in your country before you move into a permanent residence state, right? That can mean a green card, that can mean citizenship, that can mean marrying a US citizen, any status that means that you're a permanent resident in the US, work visa whatsoever won't happen or you won't get approved until you fulfill that requirement. So that was my thing. Back then in 2017, when I went back to the US for the second program, I really didn't care, right? Because I, at that point, was my best opportunity, right? So I was not thinking at all about that requirement. It came back and hit me by the time that I finished my undergrad on my second opportunity, which was by the end of 2020, 2021. At that point, I got granted a permanent resident status, but figured when we were filing it that I still had a year left to complete. All right. It's very ambiguous as far as what does those 2 years mean. What we find out at this point is that it's just time that you got to complete in your country. On paper, it says that it's time that you got to be in your country to give back, to work in this and work in that, to be involved in social activity, whatever. But nobody keeps a metric of that. So
Ask it, how is that? Yeah, like no
there's
one really has any. Okay.
so part of, and that's I'm navigating you through it because part of also what we navigate ourselves on this process was trying to get out of those 2 years, right? So, or that year, right, that I had left. So basically, we pursue what's called a J1 waiver process, in which you justify to your country and to the US that you have done so much in your country already to justify that you don't have to go back to your country, right? My premise was that, through this NGO that Madeline was mentioning, and through some other opportunities that I was able to put together while I was in the U.S., both for Honduras and in Costa Rica, I had pretty much given back to my country enough to say that I was doing what was supposed to be, and I was still doing it while being in the U.S. Right? We put that in paper. We went through almost a 2 or 2.5 year bureaucratic process of trying to pursue this just to get a no, right? Long story short, after getting, letters signed by the consulate in the US, by the embassy in Honduras, by different means of permissions that you have to get, at the end of the day, somebody just said no without even, having that big of a consideration in it. That was it, right? My only other option was to either stay in the US, studying, but at that point, studying was just being an excuse to stay longer in the US, right? So we decided to move back to Honduras under really the sense of, there's no point of staying in the US any longer if we're just postergating something that will happen eventually, right?
Yeah.
And for us, really, that meant that we couldn't fully move to another country because there was something that was still holding us to our country, which I think is a really important part of immigrating, right? It's being 100% somewhere, right? Yeah, you got your roots. Yeah, you are coming from another country, but you cannot be with your 2 feet on one part of the country and the other one in your country, right? Because that won't let you really progress or make a living, or make a life, sorry, in another place that you're trying to set yourself, right? So we took that decision back last year. We made all the arrangements to make it happen, and yeah, we're about to fully complete that year that I had left, hopefully soon, right? But still, even with me complying with that year, it's still ambiguous, right? It's at this point, we gotta wait until that date in the embassy to receive a yes or no. So that's part of the hard parts of immigrating too.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. We talk about, the hardships and the broken parts of the immigration system as well, because it's like you're doing everything as people, I know when I have conversations, like to say like the right way, right? And yet there are still layers and barriers and things and processes that you have to like try to go through. And as you said, you do all of that and pay and invest time, resources, money to still get a yes, no, maybe, or I don't know, So yeah, thank you for bringing that part of your story.
It has, just to add a little bit more, it has shaped the past 4 years of our lives, right? I think at this point, we've seen it as part of God's process on a lot of teachings that we've gotten from the process, but are not that easy to conceive or to process at the point that they're happening, right? Just to mention a few, like we had to move our wedding, right, from a set date because at the point that we were about to be 2 or 3 months before the wedding, we figured that there was a specific part of the process that required us to not get out of the U.S. Right, so we had a program wedding in Costa Rica, which is where Mari is from, and we had to cancel it, right? And I mean, I'm not trying to make a huge sad story about it, but it's just you
It
are.
is what it is. Yeah.
What I'm saying is you are your whole living and your whole life decision. It's on the hands of an immigration process, right? And that it's for the same, like that's just to mention a few, right? Think about making a permanent commitment to get a house, about making investments, right? Either in that country or some other country, studying, so on and so forth, making life itself, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
cannot
Building
take a
a home.
decision. You cannot because you don't even at that point. I think we reach a point in which we just wanted even to know, right? For us, it was gonna be better than just be still hanging, right? We
Like
were
in between,
yeah,
yeah.
we were processes that supposedly were gonna take 2 weeks, and they end up taking 6 months, right? So there we were, us checking every week, right, the website, which at the point became a very anxious process, right? Because
Yeah.
we were living for that website, checking in every night. At some point, we really had to shut down the computer and lose the website or password or whatever, so that we couldn't check in for at least every month or so, right? So, your whole life would have kind of become that, and I think that's the dangerous part. Which I think obviously it's something that you make, right? It doesn't have to be specifically the experience of everyone, as you guys were saying before, but those were some of the up and downs for us, right?
Wow.
Yeah, I think I would just like to add that it's really how you think about it, because Melvin said it shaped the last 4 years of our relationship or of our life, and I think it didn't shape it, but it was. I like to think it at this point of my life that it was an instrument to shape other things in our character, in our personalities, in our like as Melvin described, it was very much driving anxiety in both of us, and kind of, yeah, as Melvin said, like putting everything on that yes or that no, like if it was God, and it's really like that's not defining at all our future or who we are or our identity, like. So now that I think back, because I have to say, parentheses, I did my whole, berrinche, ¿cómo se dice? Like my whole tantrum.
You
Yeah, I did my whole tantrum.
good.
Yeah, I cried.
All
I said I'm not leaving.
That's
This
a
is
lot of frustration. Yeah.
oh yeah, like I said this is unfair. How come? Yeah. But after that, I have come to realize that it was really a tool to teach us, oh my god, so much. Like it's really that. I don't know if you've seen that meme of Jesus, like taking away a bear, or like a thing, a toy, a little toy from the little girl, and the girl crying and saying, like, oh no, and he has something much better and bigger behind his hands. It's been like that. It's been like, you don't even know. You don't even know. It's like God telling you, like, I know you have big dreams. I know all of those beautiful dreams of yours, but it's much better what I have for you. And it's much better what I can do for you and inside of you. It's much bigger than what you think. So I like to think of it as a tool. It's been a tool in both of our lives, independently, like individually, and in our relationship. We have grown so much. We have learned so much. Even for the wedding, like the wedding has been reshaped, and we have redreamed about the wedding now that we are about to get our ceremony in June of this year. So it's if you change of lenses or change of angle, um, it's been a beautiful process. And yes, it has a lot of hardships, and some of the basic or little ones are like, Marlene, you must have lived these ones, like being out so far away from your family and wanting to see them, having nephews and not seeing them grow up, like, see them in pictures, but you see like 3 months pass by and you're like, oh my god, how did they come so tall? Missing a Father's Day or a Mother's Day, like missing grandma's birthday, I don't know, and not being able to get all the ingredients that you want for your home recipe and trying to figure things out. Like, those are the small ones. But yeah, the bigger ones, or the ones that have more weight, maybe, are the ones that build up or shape your personality and your character to a better one, I think.
Wow. I love that you guys, thanks for sharing that, both of you. I love that you guys both mentioned how, if you have changed your perspective, like how you've seen God through the hardships, even so. And just the fact that you mentioned your identity is not found in your country or of residence, like where you live. It's who God made you to be, and the dreams that he's given you, and the things that he still has in store for both of you. I know Marlene and I are very passionate about the fact that, we've started this podcast because it's called Love Well Podcast, because we want people to understand how to love themselves better, how to love God well, and how to love each other well. And like, that's where like the immigration and topic and just the identity piece has really like merged. And I think it's been so cool to see, like, we've talked about this a lot, but like, we want people to really understand like your story, right? Like, we want them to understand, like, it's not one way. There's not like this like process that everyone experiences, right? Like you guys mentioned, you have different sides to that. Um and we want people to truly like glean from that, but also see like the Lord through all of it, and like see like immigration as like he has created each of us so uniquely differently. But like you mentioned, Melvin, like there's beauty in the difference. Like there's beauty in being able to bridge, your home country and being able to come to another country with opportunity, but to have that bridge building. And so I just love that you guys mentioned that, because we always try to at least like point out that, there are hardships in this process for sure, and we never want to like belittle that. But how cool it is to see how the Lord still has used your stories, is still using your story, and still continues to, you know, uh remind us of the truth of like our identity is not in what our, citizenship calls us to be. It's in who we are as identity as a believer of Christ. So I just love that you guys mentioned that. And I know you kind of mentioned it, but is there anything else that you've seen God do within your story, just with immigrating the first time, the second time, where you're at now? Is there anything else you want to mention with that?
I think I've seen God's work in many different ways through the whole process, but it's just amazing that throughout this process we've seen the most impossible things happen.
Yeah.
For real, there's been certain immigration milestones that we've achieved that 2-3 months before we were saying that it was completely impossible for them to happen. Yeah. 2-3 months later, they were happening, right? The same way, on the opposite, we had things that were so certain that were going to happen that we were taking them for granted, like so certain and so sure that they were going to happen, and they didn't, right? So seeing God's work on that process has been amazing for me. It has taught me a lot of patience and appreciation for where we are at this point, right? We are here in Honduras, and if you asked me a year before, I was counting the days on an Excel spreadsheet, which is for real, of how long it was, how long left we had in Honduras, right? From the first day that we were here.
Mm.
Now you ask me, I am looking forward for things to happen so that it gets delayed a little bit longer.
That's
And and this is not me not wanting to go back to the US. I'm looking forward to it, but it just teach me that it's also the process that God wants you to appreciate and to learn from, right? Not just the goal, right? Which I think is life itself. And we're ready, for what God brings, and the next step that we are about to embrace, which is going back to the US, if that's God's will. And for real, what I'm most appreciative of is that we had this gap here in Honduras before we continue our life in the US, because it reshaped and refocused where we were heading a year ago, where we were. I think at some point when you're just in that go 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 mentality, you lose track of where you're heading, what's your purpose, and what you are trying to achieve. Because you're just trying to get things or trying to get to places that were supposed to happen, right? And being back here in Honduras have helped us reshape and refocus what we're going back to the US to do, right? I think it goes back to one of the main things that we were talking before about what brought us together, right? Which was, the NGO and helping others and serving. I think somehow we lost that, right, through all those 4 years that we were just in go mode, right? Because we were just trying to achieve a milestone after another in the immigration process. It was all about us, right? Okay, now we got to do that. Now we got to have that. We got to take this program because we're going to need it for this and that. And coming back here to Honduras really reshape what we were having as a plan of life, right? And I think I can be certain to tell you that now that I'm going back to the US, I'm as excited as I was when I went back in the first time in 2016, because I reconnected with what that bridge analogy that I was mentioning is, right? So now I'm excited to go back and say, listen, I know that I can harness this and that of people that I know, this and that opportunity that I have, this and that experience that I am able to put myself into, because I know now, that I'm going to put them to this and that work back in my home country and back in Costa Rica, back whenever, right? But yeah, that's something that I am really appreciative of God being able to pretty much take your hand and guide you through, because I know I wouldn't have done it myself, right? And that's just to mention one, right? The other one that I wanted to talk to you about real quick is family itself too. I think Mari was mentioning about it. It was a year full of different things for my life. One that really marked me was my grandpa passing away. And I'm one that I tend to think of myself as somebody that take care of my people and that I love them dearly, but I'm not the one to be closest to them all the time, right? That's something that I grow through distance, right? So that's something that I'm growing. That's for friends, for family. But one thing that I, up to this day, know that it's God's work and not coincidence is that just in February of last year that we were coming back, we were able to reconnect with my family, specifically with my mom's side of the family. And back then, it was my grandpa had just been diagnosed from cancer. He was at his early stages of it, technically. And everything went down in the span of 2-3 months from there. So from February till May or so, he, cancer took the best out of him, right? But organically and naturally, we were able to be together with him through all that last steps of his life, through his sickness as well, in a way that I would never have planned for it, right? Like to the point that the last trip that my grandpa did anywhere, right? Just a road trip going anywhere was with us. Out of the blue of a weekend, me and Mariela going to his house and telling everyone, hey, let's go to the lake and have some fun and just go out for food. And it happened that was the last time that he was able to make a trip that long, or just to be able to have the energy to do so, right? And you asked me, I would never have planned it. Nobody like out in the family would have thought either, right? They were, until this day, part of his sons that, would have wanted to have that opportunity to have that last chance to spend with him. And I had the privilege to do so. And it wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have happened to have to go back to Honduras for the year, right? And
he gave me his blessing.
And
which was beautiful.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Mari was able, that was something amazing, right? Mari was able to put her talents as a physical therapist up to him, for my grandma as well. And that united the family in a way that we never had a chance to do so before by ourselves, right? So God naturally act in a way to connect us to my family here in Honduras in a way that we weren't able to do in 2-3 years, 5 years that we were together already, right? And it took 6 months for God's works to happen, right? Being here in Honduras to do so, right? I reconnected with friends that I had never the opportunity to do so. And so again, it was just a overall grounding experience, right? To be able to not start over, but to pause for a bit and keep going, right? So, that it's something that, it will never have worked the same way. You have done it your way.
Right. His timing is perfect, regardless of the situation. God's timing is always perfect.
People don't understand at the beginning. Right?
Exactly. Like when we see he has the whole picture, we just get a little frame, right? And then when you start putting the dots together and you're like, God, you know what you're doing. That's why we need to put your time, right?
I can't trust you.
I can trust you. And I think that that's so beautiful that what I heard throughout, like you guys sharing, how have you seen God through your story, is acceptance of his will. You were able to say, hey, these are setbacks. Yes, there are delays, not ideal situations. And yet, God, how he moved, how he had better, he had in mind for you guys to realign, to refocus, to take a pause, to be with family. And look at what gift he gave you, the gift of time, that it's very short. It's a very short resource that we have nowadays. But man, no, thank you for sharing that. That is absolutely beautiful. And just seeing God in your story. And I'm sure that he will continue to do and surprise you in many ways. But just seeing again what you guys shared.
If I may, I have one short story that I think I wouldn't want to get passed by, that I think
of course, please do so.
Has in the story, which I think for me comes to a full circle of where I started talking in this story that I was sharing on my side about my immigration process, which was my inspiration and my upbringings. That was my family, right? I was telling you that they were very supportive since the beginning. And part of also continuing on the lines of God's will and bigger purpose on you. Just recently, about 2 years ago, my family ended up moving to the U.S. as well. My mom, dad, my siblings, and same thing with this. It's incredible to see how God was preparing a whole different parallel story along and connect them at some point, right? I've always heard about these dreams of my mom when I was a kid, about her wanting to go and study outside, and all her dreams, and I emulate them for myself. So I took them as mine and I pursue them, right? But I never thought or imagined that me pursuing this dream for myself and Mari jumping along it would eventually come back a full circle to my mom again. Right? And my mom waited, prayed for a lot as well for her story to happen, right? She rejected many opportunities along the years so that she wouldn't go to study outside by herself, but until the right opportunity came along so that it could be for the whole family. And she's in her 50s, and most people would have thought that was it, right? I always like to joke about that I was the one who stopped my mom's dream back then when I was born. Um, but, you know, to God's purpose and story, she ended up finding the opportunity that God had for her, you know, 2 years ago in her 50s, right, for a full scholarship that not just took her, but my whole family. And we were able to be part of that story as well in a way that we never thought, on things that we were even taking for granted. Like, you know, when they moved, we were able to set them up, get them all ready, and did a move of a whole family in less than a week, right? You know, finding apartments, setting services, finding a church, finding jobs, finding everything, right? In a way that, you know, after that week, which was crazy, happened, we realized, you know, wow, that was God prepare us for this, to help them and serve them even way before that we thought, right? By having context, by having, you know, the relation, everything that we needed to do so, right? So I think it's sometimes that also helps you keep true when you're sometimes feeling purposeless in another country or in another place. Just knowing that not everything is for you and by you, which I think is a very selfish perspective that sometimes we have when we're going through something, right? We cannot find what's it for us, right? But I think God teaches at some points as well that not everything is for us, you know, that we are taking care of our others as well, right? That's God itself. That's what God sends us to the world to do, right? So I think in those times when we're purposeless, just thinking the fact that God, that very exact moment, it's using it to build up something for others as well that you don't even know. It's really reconforting and it drives you with purpose again, right? I think that for me was something key. And, you know, looking at where I'm at, where we are at, and where others that I love are at as well. And, you know, others that I don't even know that have might have been impacted by the stuff that I did and what we keep doing now as a couple. It's just makes you feel wholesome, right? Because you know that at every point God is using what you're doing or what you're not doing as well for His greater purpose, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Man, that's so good. Thank you for sharing. It reminds me of Joseph. I remember someone shared with me, like, he was sent ahead of his family. You know, he trailblazed, he prepared. And then
In the
his
meanwhile.
family later on was there, met him, and then he was able to provide a new opportunity, new ways, you know? So, how beautiful to hear that you were able to do that for your family. And look, everyone, it's never too late to start things. Never too late. Your mom is a testament of that, a testimony of that. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's all that kept coming to mind was like, okay, these are the things that matter most. Like, yes, you mentioned coming here for opportunity, and yes, there is opportunity, which is amazing gift and blessing. But really, the Lord was just using all the gifts that you already have and your close relationships with your family to be able to really like fulfill His purpose and His will through that. So I love that you shared that. Also, I know I just met you guys, but you guys are incredible. I'm honored to hear like your story and just I am truly, when I say this, I'm so excited to see what comes of it. Because I know that's not easy, I'm sure, to be in this like holding pattern and kind of like back and forth in this like, you know, bridge life that you're kind of living, one foot in, one foot out, all of the things. But thank you so much for like just sharing with our audience and with Marlene and I, like how it's been, how you guys have worked through it, your perspective, honestly, like your perspective on this entire situation has been super encouraging and just an honor to even have you guys share all that you shared today. Okay, one last thing that we always end with, unless you guys have anything else you want to say, but let me just ask this question first. So one last thing that we end with, because we love to tie it back to the meaning and the purpose, like I said, of why we started this podcast in the first place. But just through your experience, I know you guys have kind of had different experiences when it came to your immigration process, but how is something that we can do better just as human beings of loving each other well, but also loving immigrants that come to the States or, you know, are in the situations that you guys have faced?
For me, asking. Always ask, never assume. Like, please, even with something so basic as the name, if you don't know how to pronounce a name, what I do is I ask, can you spell that for me? Or we always have our cell phones. I just pull my cell phone out and say, can you type your name here so I can make sure I pronounce it correctly? And I write to myself in Spanish, how would I say that same thing in Spanish? So that's what I would have loved that people do with my name,
That's
because
so good.
I understand that R is, and we joke about this because Melvin has such an easy name to pronounce in English. He's like, Mel.
Girl, I have an R in mine too, so I
No,
get it.
I know. So
I get it.
mine is like Mariela, and at some point people say, "Oh my God, that's so beautiful! I cannot even pronounce it." And I really appreciate that compliment because people have giving it to me both in Spanish and in English. But you lose the whole thing of that compliment if you don't get any effort on pronouncing it. You can
The
ask
effort.
that,
It's
like,
the effort.
ask over and over until you get it, and that shows, I think, respect and honor to the respect and honor to the other person. It shows genuine interest. And same, I'm just giving that example of the name, but same with any other thing. Nationality, please do not assume like all Latino looking people are Mexican. Please do not assume like all Black people are African. Please, like so on and so forth. So ask,
So
and
true.
do not assume is my
I love
my
that.
ask to
So
everyone.
good. I believe, just so you know, you're not the first one to say that. So yeah, that's a good.
It's a common theme, and it's something that we talk about with Anna, like off of like the podcast. It's like, isn't it crazy? Almost every single guest that we've had has said like almost the same
Similar.
thing.
Yeah.
Names, ask questions, be curious, don't assume. Like it's literally the same, the same answers, which just goes to show like, hey, we have an opportunity here as whoever is listening, whoever is, was American born. How are we approaching immigrants and just even people that are different from you or have a different experience? It's like, there is an honor, a dignity that comes from like those differences, and also embracing them. But
and I have to maybe make a clarification there. Yes, make questions, but also please say the question in your head first. Ask yourself if it makes sense, and then say it out loud, because we have had very weird questions like recently in our apartment. Like we were at our apartment fixing our bikes, and someone comes to us and say, do you work here repairing stuff, or are you just visiting? And we're like, what the heck? Like, why would you assume that we're here repairing stuff?
For sure.
Please ask,
that's
do you live here, or what are you doing here? It's a more basic question than
more open-ended questions than a specific like
then assume,
this is the assumption of like, oh, you work here, it's like could be a a more honoring, a nicer, just nice, as you said. There are rude questions too.
maybe just asking it to yourself helps. If you are curious about someone, yes, don't stop your curiosity, because it can be very genuine. But again, making it to yourself first, and saying, would I be offended, or would it make sense if someone asked me that? Yeah, maybe. Okay, so I do it. That's for me. What's for you?
I think how people can love themselves better, right? That's the question. By
how can they show love to immigrants better?
I think it goes both ways. It's just embracing where they're coming from. I think it's so easy to lose ourselves on all the perspectives that we get of what being successful, or what being good, or what being American is, that we try to imitate or try to pursue successes that are not perhaps what we honor what's important for us. I think
Yeah.
it's very important that no matter where you're going or where you are, you stay true to the roots that or values that you have grown with. I think there's a logic to it, right? Yeah, that perhaps something it's so successful that many people are trying to emulate it, but the effort or the values that it took that first person to get to what that success meant um, is what we all should pursue, right? It's not that we all gotta find our ways, but you don't have to be like everyone so that you are gonna be successful either. You can be yourself, and if that is success for you in another country, then you should honor it, right? So I think that for me, it's something that it's so often not spoken about, right? But it's really important that you make the best out of where you're coming from, of what you've lived, and see the opportunities in it, right? I think that's what makes us unique, and that at the end of the day, what will make you different anywhere you are, and that should be your badge of identity, right? In a good way.
That reminded me of something that I really want to share. It's an analogy through an new activity that we incorporated. So we just got certified as scuba divers recently.
Ooh, wow!
I see the poster up on the wall.
Yeah, that's not ours, but yeah, it's cool. And while scuba diving, I was looking at the many fishes, right? And you get to see what you will call very small basic fishes, which are black, brown, little ones, big fishes that are just blue, and then very cool fishes that are like all colored and with different shapes than the normal fish.
Yeah.
And I thinking of what Melvin just shared, and I found myself thinking, that's so. It's like if you stop yourself from, like, my head goes to I really want to see a dolphin. I really want to see a dolphin, and I'm looking around to see the dolphin, and then I lose myself from seeing the details of the basic fishes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I was looking, I stopped myself and I looked at the fishes and I said, wow, even the smallest ones are so complex that they are so beautiful. And I said to myself, isn't it so weird that we humans are also God's creation? And I think we're the only species that when we see one another's beauties, we question our own beauty instead of embracing, who we are. And to Melvin's point of, admiring others people's processes, but not changing your identity. I saw that in the fishes, like they are imitating what the others are doing to grab food, for example, or to swim, the baby ones. But they will never say, why the heck am I brown? Why the heck am I so colorful? Why is it that I'm this shape and the other one is rhomboid? Like all of these things that we humans sometimes forget, that we stop seeing the beauty in each other's uniqueness. I really just wanted to.
I love that.
I love that analogy.
So good. No, it's a reminder of accepting ourselves and accepting others, as God created them. With it, like, it's not a surprise, as we've heard before in previous episodes, of the way that God, like where we're from, the languages we speak, our names, none of it, our experiences, all the things are not a surprise to God. So, or a mistake, exactly. Or a mistake, because as you said, we like to assign value and make differences and say, well, that one's better than this one. And it's like, no, if you look, if you see, if you hear, you will see the beauty in it. So, glean from it, lean into it. So no, thank you guys. This has been an incredible conversation. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, Melvin, you mentioned this at the beginning, and something that I can take away from this conversation too is, I think, also pointing out that the differences that we all have are not always, we don't have to always see them as weaknesses, like they are strengths. And so like you mentioned, I guess when you were here with your internship, and it was like, wow, like you did all of this with little resources, instead of being like, oh, well, this is different and this doesn't make sense, like why would you do it that way? I think that's the assumption part, but actually coming at it as a way of like honoring, you know, your culture and like where you came from and what you were able to accomplish with the resources that you had. You know, I just think that's something else that we can kind of like glean from, that you mentioned. So thank you for saying that. But I love being able to see the differences as strengths as well, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, guys, this is the end of our time together. We have been absolutely honored that you guys, you know, shared everything you did with your stories, where you're at. And we are cheering you on. We are excited for you and where God is going to continue to lead you guys. Thank you again for joining us. And we're just so thankful for the time that and the conversation that we had.
Mhm.
So honest, so rich, so good, so good. And everyone, thank you for listening and tuning in. Make sure that you come back for next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.